All right, so welcome to another Animal Activism Mentorship workshop. My name's Trey. I'll be kind of hosting for you guys today. We've got a really cool workshop coming up here. I think it's going to be a super insightful discussion. I'm really excited to learn from these mentors on what they've put together here. This workshop is presented by Animal Activism Mentorship. If you don't know who we are and what we do, we're basically a program that focuses on activism. So we try to get people to become active, empower people to become active, give them the tools to become active, and teach them through free workshops like this. And also there's a one-on-one mentorship program that people can sign up for. So if you or anybody you know is interested in that, you just go to animalactivismmentorship.com and you can sign up for one-on-one mentorship. We'll pair you up with a mentor based on how you answer the questions. It's really cool. We've seen a lot of success in it and seen a lot of cool new activists doing just incredible things. So we're really thrilled with it so far, and we're happy to bring you free workshops like this one. So thank you everybody for joining and for being here all around from all around here. So first up, we have Shannon. She is a $1 Million Vegan Ambassador. She's a certified vegan lifestyle coach and educator, and she is a mentor through AAM. And she's going to be talking about the definition of exploitation. So Shannon, take it away.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It means a lot to us that you're all here. And my biggest accomplishment though that Trey didn't mention is I'm Vegan Evan's mom, which I'm really proud of. So I'm gonna be talking, like Trey said, about the definition of exploitation tonight. It's a little bit tough for me because Julia and Chris are going to be going over some more in depth on the hows and whys. So I'm going to keep it short here. I've got a little bit of a slideshow for you. So I'm going to share that with you now, if I don't have a problem. All right, let's see. Where'd they go? We just tested this too, didn't we, guys? All right. So in the meantime, here we are. I apologize. Okay. So it should work out now. I'm so sorry, guys. Got too much open. All right, here we go. So screen share. There it is. Share. Okay. So exploitation, what does it really mean? So a lot of the time when we are, especially when I was a new vegan, I had a hard time sometimes with determining whether or not something might be vegan, whether going someplace or attending a certain event or picking out a certain product to buy, whether these things were vegan or not. And I guess what I was really trying to figure out was whether or not I was participating in exploitation of innocent animals. My objective, is animal liberation and not to participate in any oppression or exploitation. So what I do now when I'm trying to figure out if something feels like it's a gray area is it exploitation? And what I ask is it use? Because the definition of exploitation really means the action or fact of treating someone unfairly in order to benefit from them. And it's the action of making use of and benefiting from resources. The fact of making use of a situation to gain unfair advantage for oneself. So a lot of time when we look at definitions in the dictionary, they don't really relate to the way that, once a lot of us have come to realize how much animals, non-human animals, are exploited in this world. When we look at these definitions, it's not really in terms where, you know, it's the dictionary speaking about non-human animals. So we do have to do a little bit of interpreting, but it's there. So the action of making use of and benefiting from resources. So animals themselves are not resources, they're not commodities, but we as human beings have been using them and treating them as if they're objects and commodities for a very long time now, and exploiting them for what we consider to be resources and products from them. And it's definitely to gain unfair advantage for ourselves. And most often it's in the form of a monetary gain. So we're going to go to the next slide. Some synonyms for exploitation, some words that basically mean the same thing when you look it up in the thesaurus, are bleeding, using, and profiteering. And again, the definitions, the way these words are set up in the dictionary, it's not really in a way that's easily related to non-human animals, but it's still there. The meanings are still there. So to drain of money or resources, again, we're draining these animals for, thank you, Evie, Ev brought me a nice drink, for everything they have. And we drain them until we take what is the only thing they have left, their lives, especially in the cases, which I know Julie is going to get into a lot more, of the animals that are exploited for their reproductive systems. We literally drain them of everything they have until we take all that's left, their life. And again, another word for exploitation is use, which means to exploit a person or a situation, again, for one's own advantage. And one that you might not normally, you know, relate to non-human animals, but it is still there, is making or seeking to make that unfair profit. So when in doubt, just remember, this is the saying that I always return to, is that all use is exploitation, all exploitation is a form of abuse, and all abuse is immoral. And although the definitions are not up on the screen, I'm going to read you just a couple more real quick. I like to get into definitions sometimes. It's really fun if you go to, well, a lot of the different companies all around the world, they have really nice mission statements. Universities even, and places of mass exploitation, sea prisons and zoos, they really have nice mission statements, and it's kind of fun to pick them apart and really get into the definitions of what they say they do, and to look up the words. And when you're ever having a hard time trying to figure it out, you can don't just look at one definition, pick that definition apart. So really quickly, the definition of the word abuse, which again I had up, but I have too many things open, is to use to bad effect or for a bad purpose, to treat a person or an animal, and this time, and we know we're all animals, this time the definition in the dictionary is using the word animal to actually refer to a non-human animal, but this time it actually does mention them themselves. So to treat a person or an animal with cruelty or violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. And again, when we hear from Julia in just a few moments, we're going to hear about how regularly and repeatedly this happens to some of these individuals. And, you know, the definition in the dictionary of abuse even includes speaking, which we all know, because as human beings, this can be extremely abusive, verbal abuse. So it does, of course, even include speaking in an insulting and offensive way to or about someone. And even though non-human animals don't speak the same language as us, they can understand us. And even when they haven't had enough interaction with human beings to understand individual words themselves, they can still understand our tones and our body languages. And so abuse is, you know, really when you really think about it, it does cover so many different types of use. And we know that abuse is immoral. We're going to just come up with a couple of the ways that we think animals are exploited. And then we're going to come back to the group all together and just say a few of those before Julia starts. All right. Thanks, Trey.
All right, we're splitting up into breakout rooms now. See you on the other side. We should all be back.
Yeah, that went really well in my group. I heard some awesome ideas. If anybody would like, before we move on, to go ahead and say any that you thought of, just go ahead and unmute and pipe in.
I can share one. It's old fashioned, and I just recently learned this maybe a few months ago. But in South America, for example, like Chile, Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, there's an instrument. It's used for rattling. It's very old fashioned, and it's called cha-chas. And they're made from like goat horns or goat toenails or sheep toenails. And yeah, it's pretty outdated, but because there's instruments that you can make from other things besides goat, but they still choose to, because it's an old tradition.
Wow, I never have heard of that one before. Hey, George, it's nice to see you. We have some friends here from New Zealand. Do you want to mention what you had brought up?
Well, I'm Gareth and Jackie.
I'm Jackie, hi.
Yeah, so we're calling in from New Zealand. So we were talking about the canned hunting industry, and we recently spoke to Eduardo Gonçalves about how there's the whole factory farming industry out there in South Africa, which is breeding lions and other exotic animals for hunting within enclosures. So they're breeding lions and cheetahs, I think zebra, giraffe, all sorts of these wonderful creatures within cages to put them in an enclosure for some, I won't use the terms that Damien Mandy used the other day for it, but to shoot them within an enclosure. And although to us here, for sport and trophies, although to many of us here being part of the vegan community, we value the lives of an animal, of like a lion, the same as a pig, a cow, a chicken, a fish, to not be speciesist. It's incredible for us to learn more about this industry, because it was something that was so commonly hidden. And if it was out there in the general public, then, well, there should be even more outrage. But the canned hunting industry, the more we learn about that, the more it just it shocks us.
We were learning things about lion wine, which is a very prestigious gift or something that you buy. If you're really wealthy, you buy lion wine over there, and that's made from
the bones. And they literally farm these lions just to get the bones from them, to then crush them up, make it into wine. And also lion cake as well, that's often used in a lot of Asian businessmen, sort of the high society meetings and stuff. So
insane.
Thank you for sharing that. And I did mention, I know, Julia, you are going to get into that a bit as well, but that's definitely one of the less common known. Did anybody else want to mention anything?
Yeah, our group came up with a long list, and I just thought of two more when you were talking. Like, animals' skins are made for drums, for drum heads. Also jewelry, like ivory and maybe other things are used for jewelry. In addition to glue is made out of horses. And besides food and flesh and secretions and skin and all the usual stuff and testing, but Mikey also came up with using the likenesses of animals, even in advertising and marketing, and using animals in movies and television. Peyton was saying, and then I was saying, we tear down their habitats and the forests to build on. We take away their natural habitats. And then there's hunting them, but also police dogs, canine sniffers, canine bomb sniffers, dog fighting, cockfighting, even cops police officers ride horses, and then horses that draw the plows and horse carriages that are used for romantic entertainment, and the mules that are used for their backs for transporting things, and camels that are used as transportation. We discovered there's more than we thought, sadly.
Yeah, thank you for that list. Great job to Michelle's group. It's upsetting that there are this many, and we know there's so many more. And I continue to learn every day, and I just learned a few more things today already. So, all right, Trey, take it, or unless, was there anybody else that wanted to mention anything?
I could mention a few things.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, I learned in our group from Julia too, and we had a nice group, but about bear baiting, another form of animal fighting, where they pit bears against like other dogs and things. And then we didn't talk about it, but I was gonna say the exotic fish industry. Trophy exotic fish.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Anybody, one last, anybody else? All right, Trey, take it away.
All right, everybody. Appreciate everybody participating in this breakout room. I think it's an important exercise because I personally, unfortunately, it feels like every day I learn about some other way that animals are exploited. I was just sharing with one of the groups that I was in. One of the ones that, just shocked me the most was I was at a sanctuary and there's 2 fainting goats there. And the reason that fainting goats exist, from what I was told, is that the breeders would breed this trait into them so that when they get scared, they faint. And so they'll place those fainting goats on farms, like livestock farms. And, if a predator comes, like a coyote or somebody, the goats, when they get scared, they automatically faint. So the coyote will go after the goat instead of, like a cow or somebody that they want to make money off of. It's cheaper for them to just let the goat die. So yeah, it's crazy to think. There's no shortage of ways that animals are exploited, and I think it's important to learn about all of these, and it'll help us, in our activism as well when we're talking to others and educating others and everything like that. And when we're putting together campaigns, even, we can think about some of these other forms of exploitation. So up next is Julia. She's going to be talking a little bit about sexual exploitation of male and female bodies. I will give a little bit of a trigger warning. There's nothing's like too gory or anything, but there's definitely some sad images in what's coming up. Just want to give you a heads up, but yeah, take it away, Julia.
All right, so I'll just introduce myself since Trey didn't want to.
Oh, my bad. Let me do that. So Julia's from Virginia. She is the organizer for Smithfield Animal Save, amongst a ton of other things, transporting, fur protests, and lots of things like that. All 3 of these are some of the most amazing activists I know. So here's Julia.
All right, so the exploitation of animals is, of course, worldwide. There isn't a single animal I can think of that isn't being exploited in some kind of way. I'm just going to briefly go over the different categories which I feel most exploitation fits into. So there's clothing industry, there's the entertainment industry, there's the agriculture industry, farming animals, animals used in testing, the pet trade, and then the hunting wildlife. And then each of these categories, I feel that there are subcategories. So in the clothing industry, we have fur, leather, wool, skins, silk, and feathers, and more, I'm sure. Again, I don't expect to be able to name everything. There's so many ways, so many hundreds and hundreds. So I'm just going to go into the some of the obvious. In the entertainment industry, we have animal racing, animal fighting, baiting animals, animal performances, riding animals, circuses, zoos, aquariums, and again, much more. In the agriculture industry, we have meat, eggs, and dairy. In the testing industry, we have cosmetics, medical, and experimental. In the pet trade, we have exotics, domestics, and wildlife. And then in the hunting wildlife, we have wildlife, canned hunting, fishing. So that's just kind of a brief overview of the different ways animals are exploited. Again, we could sit here all day, every day for probably a week and go into all the different ways and break them each down. So in every single category across the board, there's what I consider to be the most horrific form of exploitation. It's the most heinous, and it is sexual exploitation of both male and females. You see in pretty much every category, even when it comes to wildlife, animals are being sexually manipulated and violated by humans in order to breed them into existence. Most of us are aware of this when it comes to the dairy industry. I feel like as animal activists and vegans, we talk about that the most. But it's every single animal in the agriculture industry, most animals in laboratories, hunting, especially in canned hunting, circuses, zoos, for their skins, fur, feathers, wool. All of these animals are typically artificially inseminated. That's a kind of scientific name for it, but let's break down what that really entails. So, for instance, bulls, cows used for their meat, for the dairy industry. The males are either hand ejaculated by farmers, meaning a farmer will get them erect and hand ejaculate them until they inseminate. There's another method. They will use a probe that they'll insert inside of their anus that will send an electric shock through their body that is so powerful and so painful, it forces the bull to ejaculate. And then, of course, with females, you know, their bodies are watched until they're ready to, until they go into heat. And then they are put either in a rack or restrained in another type of way. And then this semen is injected inside of them. Again, this is not just a method for cows. This is for almost every single animal used for exploitation. They are either artificially inseminated or they handpick their partners and force them together. Typically, they'll rack up the females so that they don't have any way to escape. And then the males will do what, you know, they'll mount her. And if it doesn't work that time, they'll do it again and again with different partners. So whether it's happening in puppy mills, laboratories, zoos, fur farms, fish farms, backyard breeders, the methods vary a little, but not a whole lot. And each of these, their bodies are being sexually violated. So I'm not going to show the pictures until the very end, just in case anybody doesn't want to see them. Again, I don't think they're crazy graphic. It just kind of goes to show some of the different different animals that were not so familiar with seeing the sexual exploitation, say as we are dairy cows. But I will hold off until the very end. So I'll give you a warning before I bring up the slideshow. Very few farms, less than 1%, allow animals to breed naturally in a family dynamic where, let's say, the animals are on a free range farm and they have their families and they allow them to just kind of breed naturally. So very few farms. But even in these situations where they are allowed to breed naturally, you have to think about the fact that once the babies come of age for the farmer's desired weight and age, they are ripped away from their families, mothers grieving, fathers as well. They're ripped away and taken to slaughter. And the females who are selected for breeding are left to repeat the cycle again. Even if they're not kept in gestation crates, like say pigs are, where they're unable to turn around, to move, to even come face to face with their babies, even if they are allowed that process, in the end, they go through a torturous separation, a broken family bond, where they're then murdered. And once this cycle continues so many times and the females and males used for their semen are unable to perform as well as the farmers would like, they too are then killed. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be sexually violated for the use of my I'm not a male, but for the sperm, to be molested by a farmer, forced to ejaculate, and have, and then be put back, and then this process again and again. It's so unnatural. It's so horrific. And for females as well, like, can you imagine someone watching, checking your vagina every day to see, oh, are you bleeding? Are you in heat? And then when you finally have the horrific process of someone entering your body against your will to forcibly insert semen inside of you. And during a pregnancy that for most animals lasts months and months, like cows, we know are 9 months just like us, to then have your baby murdered for profit. There's nothing more horrific than the sexual exploitation of animals in every single industry where animals are abused and used. I am just gonna, so I'm gonna show a slide and just kind of go over a few of these less known about forms or just less talked about. So trigger warning, but again, it's nothing, we're not gonna see animals killed or blood. All right, so. So this is a dog in a laboratory. So, they are, I'm gonna get a little bit emotional just because, this is horrific, what these animals are going through. This is a goat on a farm where they're using her milk. And so obviously they have to impregnate her. And this is a child, like this is someone's child who they're desensitizing very early to think that it's okay to sexually violate another living being for profit off of her babies, for profit off of her breast milk. I think that's child abuse. Here, this is a chicken who they're collecting their semen after they repeatedly raped him, after they repeatedly forced him to become erect, and then now they're collecting his semen. This is a cat, probably at a laboratory where they're, breeding them for testing, or they're breeding them for the pet trade industry. And right here, they're collecting his semen. They've sedated him, and now they're exploiting him for his semen. Here is another method that they will use for cats. They will actually have the female come in and the male mount her until he's about to ejaculate, and then someone will hand collect that. This is another one where they are injecting a dog with semen against her will. I mean, they have to tie her up, muzzle her, and hold her down in a rack. Again, another form for dogs, where they will bring in the female and they will force them to be together until the very end, where they will hand collect the semen, exploiting both female and male. The most talked about, dairy farms, where not only will they insert into her vagina, but in order to make sure the cervix stays where it's supposed to, they'll insert their arm, their entire arm, into her ass and hold her cervix still. Pigs, same thing. Same collection, and then insertion. This is a male, probably having a probe, because there's not a human present except for the semen collection. They have a device where it'll collect it underneath. Just like with cows, they will use a probe to electrocute his body, forcing him to ejaculate. This is exotics. This is for canned hunting or zoos. They'll typically sedate more aggressive potential, you're not just going to go up to a lion and ejaculate him. You probably get mauled. So they will sedate these animals and do it under sedation. So that kind of wraps up my portion of the what the kinds of exploitation there are, highlighting on sexual exploitation. Sorry that was so hard to watch, but I do think it's very important to keep the victims at the forefront of our minds at all times. I think it's important for us to remember what these animals go through and how it all started, starting with the mothers, starting with the males used for their semen. I don't want to say fathers, because they're never allowed to be a part of that process. And some animals, there isn't a father dynamic, and in a lot of animals there are. But in both, they're being denied any possibility of having a family. So that wraps up my portion, and thanks for bearing with all of that and watching, listening.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks for putting that together. I know it's intense, but yeah, I mean, it's important for us to learn about. It's something that a lot of people don't think about, even us as animal lovers and vegans and activists. We don't even think about that part of things a lot of time. It's such a violation that we can hopefully educate others about. So thank you for putting that together, and thanks everybody. So up next, we have Chris. Julia told us a little bit about the how, and Chris is gonna explain to us why, just as relevant as the how is the why. Why do we as humans do these things to animals? So I'm going to turn it over now to Chris. and oh, I keep forgetting the introductions. I'm so sorry. Chris is with Atlanta Animal Activists. So I saw we have some people in Georgia. So if you join that Facebook group, it's a really great group where, you know, they post a lot of the events going around in Atlanta and in Georgia in general. And he's also an organizer with Atlanta Animal Save and a mentor here at AAM, as well as Julia and Shannon. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris.
Thanks, Trey. Thanks for that. I think we can all just really appreciate everything that we've gotten so far. Thanks, Shannon, for really breaking down the definition of exploitation and really giving us a lot of context and like a baseline so everybody can understand what exploitation is. And also, Julia, thank you for that. That's something that a lot of us, like you said, Trey, you know, we don't think about often. We know it happens, but it's one of the, I guess it's not one of the more romanticized things to advocate against, although we are totally against it. We don't often see those pictures and those images and that type of footage. You know, we often see videos of animals being slaughtered and killed, but we never get to see, well, we rarely see the sexual exploitation of animals. So thank you, Julia, for sharing that. I know that was very, I can imagine that was very hard to even put together. So thanks for that. So with these things that we've spoken about so far, we've spoken about what exploitation is, and we've spoken about how the exploitation happens. I think one of the things that we also should focus on is that, you know, as horrific as these processes are of this animal abuse, you know, that is just another layer of the exploitation. The exploitation in itself is why these animals are being exploited in the first place. So, like I said, the reasons animals are exploited is one layer. How animals are exploited is another layer, and they both fall under the umbrella of animal exploitation in general. So I think we just have to make sure that we don't forget that how animals are treated isn't the determining factor to decide if animals are being exploited. The determining factor is if we view animals as things for us to consume, if we view their existence for us and we view them as objects. And when we do this, this is what the exploitation is. This is when we strip away their personhood, we strip away their bodily autonomy, just like the images that you saw of the animals being exploited sexually. You know, we strip away their existence. And this is the essence of what exploitation is. So sometimes the abuse tends to overshadow the issue of use at all, but we just have to remember that the use is the actual exploitation, and the other things added on top are just layers on the cake. So there can be degrees of cruelty, and the reason the use is so important is because there can be degrees of cruelty about how animals are exploited. And sometimes people use these degrees of cruelty as a justification and try to justify contributing to animal exploitation. So some methods are crueler than others. So, you know, just for example, some people like to use some of the buzzwords like grass-fed cows or things like that, terms like that. And maybe in those situations, the quality of life of an animal is better than a cow on a factory farm. But ultimately, they both are the products of exploitation. Both of their bodies are going to be exploited no matter how, you know, quote unquote, well one is treated. So, like I said, often people use better treatment of animals as a justification to contribute to animal exploitation. But this is because they are focusing on the treatment and are ignoring that these animals are still victims regardless of their treatment. It doesn't take away from the fact that they are victims altogether. So sometimes people use things like, you know, referencing, oh, I only eat halal meat. And for those of you all that may not know, this is a more of a religious process where animals are killed. I can't say in a more humane way, but the idea is that it is a spiritual experience, and you're grateful for the animal to have given their life for you to consume them. But once again, I think this focuses a lot on the how, but it doesn't really take into consideration the why, because this animal has a right to live. This animal has desires to, to have ownership of their body. These animals don't kill themselves for us. These animals don't commit suicide. We take from them, we use them, and that's what the exploitation is. Also, when we hear terms like cage-free and grass-fed, humane, killing, all of these buzzwords just make it a lot more easy to process what's actually happening. But at the end of the day, all of these terms are just making the exploitation more easily processed to people in our society to keep contributing to this exploitation. So the process doesn't determine if animals are being exploited. If, it's the fact that their bodies are being used, period, altogether. Like I said, this process can add another layer of cruelty and add another layer of abuse and oppression, but that alone doesn't make it exploitation. It's about, once again, us stealing their existence away from them and using them and their bodies for us. And other ways that animals are exploited are for clothing, like we discussed earlier. Some people consider that when they wear animals, this is a way to honor the animals. I know that people, contribute to dog shows, and they feel, that when they train their animals, this is a bonding or a way for them to, have a connection with their animals. When people go to aquariums and see animals in these cages, they aren't cages, they are glass cages. They feel like, I'm getting education, and I'm being one with nature, and I'm being more in tune with these animals. And some of these are controversial, things like horse riding, how we put saddles on animals and we put cords around their mouths and we use their bodies. Even bees, we essentially strip them of their bodily autonomy. We help them, or not help them, we artificially create queen bees and disrupt the natural order of their ecosystem for our use. So sometimes a lot of these examples, they don't take into consideration the how, like Julia stated, and they also don't take into consideration the why. So when we look at, people wearing animals for clothing, a lot of people don't think about the process that happened to get a actual cow to become a leather coat. And they don't think about the why either. They just have these products and they wear them. And like I said, with the dog shows, they train these animals, quote unquote, train them for entertainment. So a lot of times these forms of exploitation, they exclude the how and the why. And those both don't get the proper light that they deserve. So just like I said, in all of these examples, people tend to ignore the treatment, and they also ignore why these animals are being used. Ultimately, what I'm saying is seeing animals as objects for us to use, it feeds into the overall culture of animal exploitation, because we don't see them as beings, we see them as things. And we don't give them the ownership over their existence that they deserve. And what's interesting is that in our society, we have a lot of people fighting to have control over their body and control over the way they should exist. And I think we aren't going to be able to be the society that we need to be until we can consider some of that same consideration to animals, because until we do that, until we extend that compassion to our non-human animal family, it continues to foster a culture that just perpetuates exploitation. So that's more of the why animals are exploited and why it's very important to remember why they are exploited and not just only think about the how. Although the how is grotesque and cruel, it's the fact that their bodies are being taken away from them. They don't have ownership over their existence, and they are being used for us. And I know a lot of the things that we've spoken about this evening, they're pretty heavy, and it can really bother you and trigger you. I think one of the ways that we can start to grow beyond this anger as a society is establishing a Bill of Rights for animals. And that's what Rose's law is trying to do right now. We're trying, this law is trying to establish a sense of personhood. I think that's the only word that's coming into my mind right now for animals. And essentially, we want this bill to be enacted so animals do have moral consideration, even if they're not going to be considered, equal to humans in our society, which I think all of us on a spiritual level and on a personal level do consider our companion animals and other beings that exist as equal to us, and they're not inferior to us. But we hope that our society at least can give them the moral consideration to not exploit them. So Shannon, if you would like to share more about Rose's law, go ahead and let people know exactly what that is.
All right, so if you want to learn more about it, you can go to roseslaw.org. I'm going to screen share now and show you this page. So basically, we're a little ways into the page right now, but this is the Animal Bill of Rights, which has the right to rescue from distress and exploitation, right to a protected home, habitat, or ecosystem, right to have interests represented in court and protected by law, right to not be exploited, abused, or killed by humans, right to be free or to have a guardian, not owned. So I think that the Animal Bill of Rights is beautiful and really important. And this web page, this website that's created by Direct Action Everywhere has a lot of awesome information on it. And this is the logo, the symbol that they use now, which is really beautiful. Rose was a chicken that was rescued during a mass action in California. And it's been a little while since I heard the story, but if I remember correctly, the activists who were part of rescue team were all apprehended during the middle of a rescue, and the animals that they were attempting to bring to safety were pried out of their arms, and they were all murdered. I believe that was by law enforcement or some government agency. And one officer gave one chicken to the activist who was in such bad shape and said, just take her, go. And she was named Rose, and Zoe Rosenberg really gave her so much love while she was on this planet, and she had a ton of health issues, but I believe the webpage does tell about Rose as well. I was here during this action that's on the screen right now, which was in Petaluma. I believe it was the same farm. I think they went back months later to that same location, which is actually a farm that supplies to Whole Foods and Amazon with some of those buzzwords that Chris was talking about, cage-free and humane. And Evan and I were two of several hundred activists who stormed that factory farm. And I can personally tell you the things that we saw were or anything but kind and benevolent, which is what the meaning of the word humane is. And, you know, like Chris was saying, it's not the, like, it's the why that's so important, because there's so many, I'm sorry, I'm just going to ramble while I'm trying to get the screen to scroll. It's frozen right now. But a really good example that he made me think of is backyard chickens. Often people really have good intentions in their heart because they do find out about the way that chickens are treated on factory farms, but they have skewed beliefs because we've been lied to our whole lives that they need to eat chickens' ovulations in order to be healthy. And so they think that a solution might be to have chickens that they take care of and that they can love and just, you know, have their eggs. But it's so important to realize that no matter how much someone might feel like they're giving them love, and even if they do keep them safe, like they're still being used, they're still being exploited, they're still being something's being taken from them that they don't have the ability to give. And even if they did, they don't understand that we've literally, you know, selectively manipulated them over hundreds of years, causing them to, you know, have a different thing happening with their entire reproductive system, making them lay a backyard averages an egg every other day, which depletes their bodies of all these nutrients. And it is such a form of exploitation, and it perpetuates the use of eggs in general. So it's just a good example that the why is just so important, because even in those scenarios that seem like they're so much less awful than the ones that are so obviously awful, it's still exploitation, and there is no right way to do these things, because abuse is always going to be wrong. All right, guys, it's not going to let me scroll anymore. So please go to roseslaw.org on your own. It is going to let me stop the screen share. So I'm going to do that now. Thank you for hearing my rambling while I try.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Oh boy, it's not even letting me stop. Trey, can you kick me off the screen share?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Shannon, and thanks, Chris, for that. I think what you touched on was so important, because it's a slippery slope, right? As soon as we view an animal as anything other than a being, as soon as we view an animal as a product, even in the slightest way, if we view an animal's you know, secretions as a product, a lot of people talk about, you know, like backyard eggs and stuff like that. Well, if they lay an egg and they walk off, you know, what's the harm? Well, you could argue that there are some additional harms, but at the root of it, you're viewing an animal's secretions as food and as a product, and that is the mindset that got us into this whole thing as it is, where we live in a world full of factory farms and dredging the ocean for, you know, I mean, it's horrible, and it's a very slippery slope, and that's why we should never even view animals as a product or as anything other than individuals that deserve those rights that Shannon was talking about. So thank you all for joining. That concludes this part, but we would like to allow some question and answer here. So if you have any questions for any of the mentors that gave presentations, please ask. Just a reminder, we are recording, so if you don't want to be on camera, you can put it in the chat, or you can even just turn your camera off and come on over the microphone. So if anybody has questions or wants to start a dialogue about any of this, now is the time. You can just come on as you please.
And I saw a couple questions in the chat, maybe while people are gathering together their thoughts to come on. There's one, it says, how do you help people transition from exploitation? Say, for example, Hare Krishna's use of cows, milk for worship, and they take good care of the cows' calves, and cows are well taken care of. How do you help them transition?
So we did get to talk about that a bit in our group after we finished earlier, but I can just briefly go over it real quick again. There are some very few farms that do allow cows, babies to stay with them. However, they're still having a good portion of their breast milk stolen. They're still being encouraged to, have sex and have babies. And it just, if we really use our common sense and we think about it, to just have to have babies at all times, they have to keep coming in order to keep being able to get breast milk. And cows live 20 to 25 years. So we just know that the exponential growth to allow them to live any type of life it's just really not possible. And so many people that are part of some of the religions that do try to maybe source in a less awful way that they consider to be humane, we know that like the majority of the people are just buying at the regular supermarkets anyway, so it's not even. But yeah, in the rare instance, it goes back to what we were just talking about. It's the same with the backyard eggs. It's the same, like there's just, all use is exploitation. All exploitation is a form of abuse, and it's immoral. And what makes it especially wrong is that we don't have to. So like, if it was for survival, it was necessary, it would be really sad to have to do something, but like to just to allow for people to keep having babies, and then like, yeah, you might let their baby stay with them, but you're still going to like violate them and put your hands on, like, I wouldn't want anybody touching me after I had my child and like stealing some of my breast milk. So if we use empathy and we put ourselves in the situation of the animals, and we don't back down, and we continue to be honest with people, and we don't waver, and we just remember that all use is exploitation, and then I think we're good to go. And if we stay, we can help them. We just can't budge. But we have to be kind too. We can't be mean to people. So especially people that have good intentions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and to add to that, I think what you said is so important. We have to remember that, the exploitation, we have to keep that at the forefront of our minds. So another thing is, a lot of religions, well, none of them really mandate that you have to exploit animals, but also there are vegan religious groups that are, taking stances. Like I know there's, I don't know the exact names, but it's a website like Muslims for Vegans or something like that, where they are Muslim, and they are talking about how to be vegan through their religion. So I think a lot of religions are starting to do that, because a lot of vegans are of different faiths. So I would just, reach out, maybe Google, Hare Krishna vegan practices, or whatever is applicable to the religion or the practice or the spirituality that applies to that situation. So I think those are starting to pop up more and more.
Definitely. There was another good question that I do think that I can answer, and then if anyone wants to add to it. So here's the justification hunters give for hunting deer. They are a nuisance. How do you counter that? How to get the deer population in check so that car accidents don't happen. I know these are horrible excuses, but we are building roads in the deer habitat. So just to go over really quick, we know from science that hunting deer and diminishing their population that way doesn't actually diminish the populations. The way that deer breed, the way that they continue to have babies will be on what the population is. So if you are taking away a large portion of their population, they're going to start having twins or triplets. They will get their populations back up to what the surrounding areas are. They're going to be able to find enough food, water, etc. So hunting them doesn't really help with that at all. Also, a large portion of that is because their predators are being hunted. So coyotes, wolves, and their other natural predators are being killed off as well. So if we were to get hunting in check to where their predators weren't being hunted, that would naturally keep the deer populations in check. Another form of population control is pellets that they have used in a lot of different areas, where the pellets are put out and it makes them less fertile or infertile, which would actually do what hunting these animals, what they're trying to do by hunting them, would be to diminish their populations, which of course doesn't work by hunting them, but by making it so that they cannot continue to breed would. If anyone else has anything to add to that, that's what I got.
Yeah, I'll add what you said about the we need to stop with the hunting of the predators as well. A lot of times, I know at least around where I live, the reason that people are hunting those predators to begin with is because the predators are getting their farmed animals that they shouldn't be exploiting to begin with. So they will take a tag and put the tag on a coyote's ear, and whoever shoots that coyote that season gets some prize money or something like that. And the initiative, or the reason behind this initiative, is because farmers don't want those coyotes getting into their chicken coops and stuff like that. So the level of exploitation just goes so deep on so many levels. Here we are, because some animals are being exploited for their bodies, these other animals are being exploited by being shot for prize money or whatever. And then then we've got the prey animals, as more prey animals as a result of that, and then people find an excuse to kill them. I mean, it's just a nasty, vicious circle that's all deep rooted in exploitation. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, Julie, you muted.
Oh, I said, I think those are all the questions that I saw over the chat. If I missed one, feel free to speak up. And then if anyone wants to come on now and ask questions.
I have a question about Chris's part. It can go to anybody. And maybe we'll have some questions by the time y'all are finished with this one. But, talking about the roots of exploitation, when you're talking to people who are not yet vegan, do you bring this up? Do you bring up, viewing animals as a product or as anything other than a being? Do you bring that up, or is that something that you feel like needs to be eased in over time throughout a conversation? Because I don't know, I think sometimes people get it when I say that, but then other times, I just feel like that's so quick and to the point that they're not even getting those layers of, kind of like what we were talking about. It's layers on this cake. Cake might not even be a good analogy because cakes are thought of as good, but these layers of exploitation, you've got the super obvious, which is murder, and then you have maybe the less obvious, like, horse riding or bomb sniffing dogs or something like that. Do you ever, in like a conversation on the street or with a stranger, ever just go straight to the point, and does it work in conversation?
I have done both. I'll just jump in to answer that. And I think you have to really gauge your audience. Some people are ready for that, and some people it just goes right over. So I don't think there's a clear-cut answer for whether or not to do that. I think it just depends on like knowing your audience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I think I know something that I do often. I try to make people understand that I often use people as companion animals as a way to slide into that conversation, because they do have that connection and bond with the companion animals that they have. So I think that's an easy way to have that discussion. But yeah, it is a slippery slope. But I tend to usually build up to that. I don't think I start off with that. But that's just kind of like a part of my outreach. That's just the kind of outreach that I do. I talk about, I don't want to say spirituality, but I just view things, I just have this interconnectedness type of perspective, and it's hard for me to hide. So it just comes out. But like I said, I don't bring that out as the first thing, but I kind of do build my way towards that. That's kind of like where I want my conversation to go. So I'm kind of leading them towards that at the end.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Just you know, gauging the conversation, engaging your audience. Something that I do sometimes is if people say, you know, I like my meat, I'll just say something like, your meat. You know what I mean? Like, is it yours? Is this animal yours? But yeah, Shannon, I don't know if did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Trey. Trey has to unmute me because I'm totally frozen. um, so yeah, I was just gonna kind of say the same thing, but a little bit opposite. Like, yeah, you definitely gotta gauge the audience. If somebody doesn't care about animals, like non-human animals themselves, like they don't consider themselves to be an animal lover, they still may have a very good sense of like justice and injustice, and they might care about things like that. So, or they might care a lot about, you know, like their spirituality or religion, and what they feel, you know, that requires or of them, or, you know, so like you gauge your audience and you utilize as many tools as you can to help them to align their actions with the morals and values that they do have, the things that they do care about. So Trey, I'm sorry, I'm a little fuzzy on whether the question was, do you bring up the exploitation or spirituality? But
No,
whatever
I said, do you ever like get to the point
of
on
exploitation.
the fact that, you know, the animal's not yours and that's really what it boils down to? Or, you know, do you, you know, kind of start out with the more shocking things and kind of work your way into that conversation?
Yeah, everybody's different. I think the more knowledge that we acquire, then the more we can be like chameleons. And I say that in a very non-speciesist way, in a complimentary way, because they're awesome at changing and blending. And the more we can adapt and change, then I think the more people we can help. But and the more of us that there are, then yeah, the better.
Dana had a question.
Oh, and really quick too, I'd say something similar to if somebody says, I like my meat, uh, you know, we're all made of meat. So it's like, yeah, you're made of meat too, buddy. You're made, but I don't like to use that word typically because it's a euphemism, but unless I'm talking about plant meat, because vegans eat meat. Do you guys know that song? Tori Washington is the guest in it, and it's Gabriel. I think he goes by Guy's Eye on YouTube. It's a fun song.
No, somebody got to pull it up.
I can't because I'm frozen. Even though I can speak and not mute myself, I can't.
We might get hit with a copyright on YouTube later if we do. Okay.
Oh, no, just drop the link.
Yeah, somebody dropped the link. All right, so Dana asked how long lambs live, the ones that are mutton, end up being mutton. And Julia answered, their breeding stock's kept for a few years, but their bodies break down after about 4 to 5. And yeah, oh, sorry, there's a whole conversation going on here. I won't repeat all of it. Does anybody have any other questions? We got time for a couple more if anybody wants to come on or leave one in the chat.
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask Peyton, yeah, send her that graphic with the ages. It would be interesting to do like what you did, Peyton, with the ones killed for their flesh, but also for the breeding animals. That would be good too. Because I love that graphic that you made. I think it's super helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to do one for a bunch of different, because that was kind of, you know, animals exploited and killed for food. it would be interesting to do one for different, like animals exploited and killed for fur. Like, you know, they have different lifespans, you know, dictated by humans. So doing a bunch of different ones for all the realms of exploitations would be, I want to say interesting, but it would just, you know, useful, I guess. Would be
Profound, yeah, to see.
So I just got YouTube up on my phone to try to look up the video. And a cool thing is that first thing on mine that popped up is Peyton, one of our mentors, and from Emory University, the video. So if you don't already, follow, subscribe to Animal Activism Mentorship on YouTube.
Yeah.
Do it.
All right. Any questions? Any questions?
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. Just one little one. Firstly, I wish everybody that I knew could watch and listen to this because, you know, yeah, Julia especially had me a bit emotional, and it's stuff that we know, but then hearing someone actually spell it out what happens, just, you know, like somebody else messaged, you know, just had me feeling sick and so angry. And there's so much to take in all the time. There is so much happening to every animal, like you say, that we know about. And I'm great. I'm a writer. That's what I do. So I write stuff, you know, and it all comes out. But when you're trying to have conversations with people and really get through to them, are there any tips that you guys have for retaining facts, information? Because when I've got time to write something, you know, I can look it up, I can research it, all comes out nicely like it's supposed to. But when actually having conversations, I'm like, well, you shouldn't do this because you come out with like bits of things that you want to say, but not the real impactful stuff like you guys have been saying. So, I mean, if anyone has any tips on, fact retention or just anything at all in speaking to people, that would be great.
Yeah, I think the most useful way of talking to people, doing outreach, is with question-based talking. It keeps them engaged. It forces them to not be able to tune out. So leading with questions like, hey, do you guys know what sexual exploitation is? Have you ever seen X? Were you aware of this? Or get them to respond without just a yes or no, like, what do you think this means? Are you okay with this and why? It forces them to not only stay engaged, but also gets their brain wheels spinning. And oftentimes they will come to the conclusion that you're going to give them on their own if you word it right. That way they're telling themselves and you what you were already going to tell them, but that way they believe it. Like, versus having someone tell them like, this is abuse, get them to come to that conclusion on their own with question-led responses or engagement. I personally think that's the most effective. And then leaving them with something to one or two, maybe three different links, documentaries, something to look up, watch, so that it's not overwhelming. Because when you're just throwing fact after fact, or like, here's 10 different documentaries to leave with, I feel like people just get so overwhelmed and they put it on the back burner and they're like, I'll look at that tomorrow. And that turns into a month or a year. And they're like, yeah, I'm still really interested, but it's a lot for me. Like, this is too hard. So when you lead it with having them engage, them answer the questions that get them to the conclusions, and then giving them just a little bit to go research, I think it goes so much better, and you get such a better result that way. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'll add too that, don't put too much stress on yourself to know every single fact, because really it all circles back to, it's wrong. The truth is on your side. Bring it back to what you do know. And it's like we talked about earlier. I mean, all of this is the root of viewing these animals as something other than beings instead of someone's, seeing them as things instead of somebody's. So if you bring it all back to that, I mean, you a couple of facts here and there are good to know. Like if you want to, say, well, for health, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, largest nutritional group, says it's okay. And then just, a couple things here and there to prove that we don't have to. So then it gets down to, if we don't have to, then why do we, and also I want to just say that usually like about once a month, we do outreach workshops in here where we just not only give some tips, but we also go into breakout rooms and we do kind of like role play and just practice having outreach conversations. And I find that really useful. It helps me a lot. So if that's something you're ever interested in, yeah, please join us for that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you both very much. That would be great. And yeah, that's great advice too, Julia. Thank you.
I know there's actually there's a name for that method though, and it slipped me.
Socratic.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. It was going to keep bugging me all night if I didn't hear that.
That's the one I always hear about. I'm like, I really got to polish up on that. That's what I need to be doing.
Yeah, we look forward to taking part in more of this, because at Vegan FTA, that's all what we're about, is making more advocates for the movement, making more activists, and making them more effective in how they're doing it and going about it. Because there's a million ways for us to be creating this vegan world, but having that insight and knowledge how to do it more tailored to your abilities and skills is just fantastic. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, it's been great.
So is that how we can find you? We would look up Vegan FTA?
Yeah, if you just look up Vegan FTA, we've got a big following on Facebook as well as YouTube, and then all the other sort of social media things. But yeah, just Vegan FTA, like it is in the name tag thing. And
we're actually talking to Chris this week. We have a weekly activist series where we showcase a different activist, from all over the world, and talk about the work that they do and all kinds of things. And basically, yeah, to showcase the countless different ways there are to be active in the movement, in the hope of resonating with people somewhere. Oh yeah, that's a strength of mine. I could do that, or something that's really inspiring or appealing. So yeah, we thought we're having a meeting Chris early coming here, which is nice.
This is amazing. Now that I see the logo, I already like the page. I recognize the logo. So cool to have you both here. Awesome.
I'm like starstruck because I've been following you guys for a long time, and it's so cool because I'm a big fan. Let me not get all fangirl.
Before I forget, I agree with everything, Trey and Julia said, and I might be reiterating some of it, but I have so many facts because I've been doing research since 1996. Basically every paper I had any free reign on, I always did. And looking back now, if you really do, they say that most people don't change over facts. They say it's their emotions, but I still love to have them. So if you really do want to remember, like Tracy, pick a couple to start with that are gonna be very useful in each category. And for me, what I was gonna say is looking back at the papers that I wrote for college, some of them, not only did I write them, which probably helped it stick in my brain to type it out and all, but then I read them to my mom, and I basically, at the time, I wanted anybody to listen to me, and to get them to listen to me, I'd be like, hey, can you do me a favor and let me read this paper? Or, hey, now I'm going to read it in a public speaking class. Can you hear me? So saying it out loud over and over and hearing this workshop made me remember I wrote for philosophy in college. I wrote this paper that really kind of is relevant for tonight's thing. Maybe I'll put it in the group for the event page, but it was all the philosophers and why they had issues with eating animals. And I wasn't vegan when I wrote it. I'd been vegetarian for 19 years before I found out about some of the other industries like dairy and eggs and went vegan. But when I wrote that paper, I was vegetarian. So I found all the vegetarian philosophers, which is most all of the very well-known ones. And it's like, why do we uphold all this stuff that they said so high and then we leave this out? And it's because it's convenience, obviously. They want to, you know, conveniently leave out all the things they don't want us to know. But it's really interesting because other than Peter Singer, none of these people were even alive at a time when factory farming existed. They all were what people like to think of the idyllic, you know, cows, you know, pasture, pigs in the barn, pigs in mud, you know, all that. And so it's like they still, I was being funny. I did a play on words. I said they had beef with eating beef. Even back then. But anyway, I'll put the link in the event page if anybody wants to check it out. But that really helped me, I think, to learn over the years. And then Evan, he made a video like 3 or 4 years ago for climate change, and that really, it's a 7-minute video. It's on the veganevan.com page, and that helped me with all the environmental facts about the mass extinction, the 6th great mass extinction. And then when I gave that speak out loud many times, it sticks in my head those ways. But I'll shut up now. I just can't mute myself. So it's tempting to not.
I also sent you guys on your Vegan FDA Facebook a message with my favorite video by Joey Carbstrong of doing outreach and the best tips for your own individual like skills and expertise. It's, if you want to watch it, it's my favorite workshop that he does.
Awesome. Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you.
Cheers for that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Skills nicely.
We actually got to talk to Joey, and yeah, it was he was one of the ones who was advocating for the Socratic method and stuff like that. And ever since then, we've kept on going. We need to do a video focus. We need to have a specialist on that to really like nail it out, because we end up speaking to so many different people and so many different avenues that, as we said today, there's so many different forms of exploitation, so many different rabbit holes to go down, that then we end up forgetting about it. And then, yeah, like today, we now need to go back and nail that back onto the list of things to do. And
it's been so good to have them, so many of them spelled out here, though, because you're right, we do forget. You know, a lot of us we focus on dairy, or we'll focus on animal testing or something like that, but there is so much more going on than that. So it's been great. Really good.
Yeah, and then just to come back to, no matter what form of exploitation, I feel bottom of every single one of those is sexual exploitation. So no matter how well they're cared for, they're going to be killed and they're going to be sexually exploited. And those are horrific things. So you can't justify either.
All right, everybody. I think we might have time for one more question before we wrap up. If anybody has one more question. Anyone? Going once, going twice. All right, well, if you have any questions afterwards, you can always reach out to these folks individually, the ones that gave the presentations. We really appreciate you joining these, and thanks for some of the feedback that you gave as well. Like I mentioned, this is part of Animal Activism Mentorship, just part of what AAM does to foster a sense of community amongst activists. Hopefully this provides a little bit of unity. Hopefully it provided something that you can take away and use in your own activism. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you met someone new, and I hope that we can all connect. A great way for us to do that is in the Animal Activism Mentorship Community Facebook group. That's where we post all these workshops, and we also just share in there different forms of activism, different things we're inspired by, different things we may want to try in our own activism. It's just a great place where we can share these types of things with each other. You know, if you did an action, you can let us know what worked, what didn't, you know, that type of thing. Just a great kind of safe space to share those types of things. And also, if you want to refer to this workshop later, if you want to look at any of the past workshops we've done, you can go to the Animal Activism Mentorship YouTube page. This one will be up within 24 hours, and we'll be there to refer back to. And if you want to share it with a friend or share it with anybody at all. And yeah, we also have an Instagram, Animal Activism Mentorship. So yeah, please check those things out and link up with us. We want to stay connected with everybody here, and you know, we want to keep up with you and see what you're doing, and be inspired by you as well. Lastly, again, Animal Activism Mentorship, we offer one-on-one mentorship for new activists or even experienced activists who are looking to, you know, ramp up their activism to the next level. So if you yourself would like some mentorship, anybody that's in here, or if you know of someone who wants to become an activist but just doesn't know how to get started, we just kind of try to help, you know, propel them into what they already want to do. We have them fill out a form on animalactivismmentorship.com and pair them up with who we think would be the best fit for them. And like I said at the beginning, you know, it's been awesome seeing people go from never having done any activism at all to doing some amazing things. So we hope that we can just be kind of a hub for people who, you know, don't know where to get started, but have that passion, have that fire, and have that will to fight for animals. So thank you very much, everybody. We hope you'll stay in touch. Lastly, I want to preview a workshop that we have coming up on March 20th. So in just a few days here, 5 days. It's on the book Vistopia by Claire Mann, who is a vegan psychologist. And if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. I ordered it and read it, and it was a quick read, very validating read, because, you know, just, you know, I think some of us were getting emotional during Julia's part, because we see the world so much differently as vegans and as activists, and many of us, you know, see this kind of trauma, expose ourselves to this kind of trauma all the time. And just hearing a professional psychologist, or reading the words of a professional psychologist, it just validates, for me, it validated my feelings that I go through, because sometimes, you know, we feel like we've just woken up in this world. People compare it to the Matrix all the time. You know, we took the red pill, I think it is. We took the red pill, we see the truth, and we're wondering why everyone else isn't doing something. And she in the book really goes through a lot of this stuff. And one of our mentors, Michelle, is going to be hosting that, and really excited about it. So we hope you'll join us for that. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much for joining. Appreciate you all, and hope to see you next time.